The city was bustling with life, the streets crowded with people rushing about their daily routines. Cars honked, people talked, and the usual noise filled the air. But all of that changed in an instant when a strange object appeared in the sky. It was like a star falling from the heavens, streaking across the blue, and then crashing down in the middle of the city street with a deafening noise. People froze. Cars screeched to a halt, and a moment of silence followed before chaos erupted. A loud rumble shook the ground as the strange craft hit the pavement. Dust and debris flew everywhere, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. People screamed and scattered in every direction, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The ship was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. It wasn't like an airplane or a rocket, but something entirely different, as if it came from another world. The metal was shiny, reflecting the sunlight in strange ways, and the shape was odd, smooth, sleek, and futuristic. It looked nothing like anything built on Earth. As the dust began to settle, a low groan came from the wreckage. The door of the ship creaked open, and from within, a small figure emerged. The crowd gasped. The creature was tiny, smaller than a human child. It had pale blue skin, with large dark eyes that shimmered in the light. Its hair was a glowing silver, and it looked fragile, as if it could be blown away by a strong wind. The tiny alien girl wobbled as she stepped out of the ship, her legs shaky as she tried to stand. She seemed disoriented, as if she didn't know where she was or how she got there. She took a few hesitant steps forward, but her movements were slow, and she looked around with wide, confused eyes. People stared at her in disbelief, unsure of what to do. Some people pointed, others whispered to their friends. One man braver than the rest took a step closer. "What is that?" he muttered under his breath. No one had any answers, but they all knew one thing. This was not something they had ever seen before. As the alien girl took another step, she tripped, falling onto the cold pavement. A few people gasped, but most just stood frozen in place, unsure of how to react. Was she dangerous? Was she friendly? What was she even doing here? No one knew. That's when a group of local bullies who had been hanging around the street corner noticed her. They were young, loud, and always looking for trouble. One of them, a tall boy with a cocky smile, nudged his friend and pointed at the alien girl. "Hey, look at that. It's a freak from outer space," he said, laughing. The other bullies joined in, making fun of her appearance. They yelled things like, "What's the matter, lost your way home? And go back to your planet, alien." The alien girl, still on the ground, looked up at them, her large eyes full of fear. She didn't understand their words, but she could feel the cruelty in their voices. The bullies laughed louder, getting closer to her. They began tossing small rocks at her, and she flinched with each one. Her fragile body couldn't defend itself, and it seemed like she was completely helpless against them. The alien girl tried to get up, but she stumbled again, unable to find her balance. It was clear that she didn't know how to survive in this strange place. The crowd watched in silence, some of them feeling pity for the alien girl, but no one dared to stop the bullies. After all, the creature was so small, so vulnerable. Surely, it was just some freak accident, and they didn't need to worry about it, right? But just as the bullies were about to throw more rocks, something unexpected happened. A figure stepped forward from the crowd. It was a young man, perhaps in his 20s, with messy brown hair and a worn jacket. His eyes were focused on the alien girl, and his face showed a mixture of concern and determination. He wasn't like the others who had just watched. He was different. "Leave her alone," the young man shouted, his voice cutting through the air. His words were clear and firm, and for a moment, the bullies stopped, staring at him as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. But the young man didn't back down. He stood his ground, his eyes locked on the bullies. "She's not a freak. She's lost and scared. Leave her alone." The bullies sneered, unimpressed. "What's this? You gonna protect her?" one of them said, laughing. "What are you gonna do about it?" The young man didn't answer with words. Instead, he took a few steps forward, his posture strong. "I'll stop you," he said calmly. The bullies looked at each other, unsure of how to react. They were used to pushing people around, but something about this young man's confidence made them hesitate. The alien girl, still on the ground, looked up at him. Her eyes shimmered with both fear and hope. She didn't understand what was happening, but in that moment, she realized she wasn't alone. Someone was standing up for her. And so, the tiny alien girl's journey on Earth began, with a single human stepping in to protect her from the cruelty of those who didn't understand. What would happen next? Would this young man be able to protect her from the dangers that lay ahead? The answers were still unknown, but one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The scene in the street was chaotic, yet oddly still. The young man stood between the bullies and the alien girl, his back straight, his eyes unwavering. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He wasn't wearing a cape or armor, and he certainly wasn't some famous figure everyone knew. He was just an ordinary guy who had witnessed something that felt wrong, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't walk away. The bullies looked at him with mock amusement. Their leader, a tall kid named Jake, smirked and stepped forward. He had always been the tough one, the guy who liked to be in control. "What's the matter, man? You gonna protect this little alien?" Jake jeered, crossing his arms over his chest. "What's she gonna do for you, huh?" The others snickered, throwing a few more stones at the alien girl, who was still kneeling on the ground, shaking. She wasn't used to being in this kind of situation. No one had ever treated her like this on her home planet. She looked at the young man, her eyes full of confusion. The boy's sudden intervention was a strange comfort, but she didn't understand what was happening. Why was he helping her? The young man didn't flinch at the insults. Instead, his eyes stayed fixed on the bullies, and he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "It doesn't matter who or what she is. You don't get to treat someone like that." The bullies paused for a moment. Jake's smirk faltered, but only for a second. "You're pathetic," he muttered, then pushed the young man lightly on the chest, testing him. "What? Are you gonna cry now? She's nothing but an alien freak. She doesn't even belong here." The young man stood his ground, unmoved by the shove, his hand clenched into a fist at his side. He had grown up in this city, dealing with bullies. Like Jake his entire life, but this was different. Something about seeing the alien girl, so small and vulnerable, so helpless, sparked a fire inside him. It was the way she looked at him, as though he were the only one who could save her from the cruelty of the world. Her fear was something he couldn't ignore. "You're wrong," he said, his voice low but full of conviction. "She belongs here just as much as you or me." The bullies, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected resistance, glanced at one another. Their confidence faltered. It was one thing to pick on someone weaker than themselves, but now they were facing someone who wouldn't back down. Jake, the leader, grew more irritated. He took a few steps closer to the young man, his fists tightening. "You don't know anything about her, do you? You think you can stop us from having a little fun? You really think that?" The young man didn't say a word. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wouldn't let them bully the alien girl any longer. He glanced down at her, noticing her trembling hands. His heart softened. She was terrified, and yet she was looking at him with such trust. He couldn't let her down. Suddenly, the alien girl, still on her knees, lifted her head. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she felt something powerful stir within her. It wasn't just fear, no, it was something else. A strange warmth, a force that seemed to come from within her. She stood shakily to her feet, her eyes locked on the bullies. Her small body quivered, but something in her began to change. The young man saw it too. He noticed how the alien girl's skin shimmered slightly, as if she were drawing energy from the very air around her. Her body glowed faintly, and a soft hum filled the air, barely audible, but definitely there. The bullies, who were once so confident, began to look nervous. What the hell? One of them muttered. Without warning, the alien girl raised one hand toward the bullies. The air seemed to ripple around her fingertips, and the stones that had been thrown at her just moments before now hovered in midair. The bullies stared, eyes wide, as the rocks slowly floated around her, held in place by some unseen force. The young man gasped, realizing that the alien girl wasn't as helpless as he had thought. The air around her began to glow brighter, and the bullies took a few steps back, clearly intimidated. "What is she doing?" Jake shouted, his voice shaking with unease. The young man looked at her with awe, but also with a sense of understanding. "She's not here to harm anyone," he said, his voice softer now. "She just wants to be left alone." At that moment, the alien girl made another move. She lowered her hand, and the floating rocks dropped harmlessly to the ground. The light around her began to fade, but the tension in the air remained thick. The bullies didn't know what to do. The strange girl they had been mocking had just shown them a glimpse of something they didn't understand, a power they couldn't control. Jake, his bravado gone, stepped back. "You think you can just come here and use magic on us?" He sneered, but his voice now lacked its previous confidence. "You better watch yourself, freak." The young man stepped between the bullies and the alien girl, his posture protective. "You don't get to call her that. Leave her alone," he repeated, his voice steady. For a long moment, the bullies stood frozen. Then slowly, one by one, they turned and walked away, muttering curses under their breath. They weren't sure what had just happened, but it was clear. They weren't in control anymore. The young man had taken a stand, and something in the alien girl had shown them that this wasn't a fight they could win. As they walked off, the young man looked down at the alien girl. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. She didn't say anything, but the way she looked at him said it all. She was scared, yes, but she knew now that she wasn't alone. The young man offered her a hand. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded slowly, her small hand trembling as she took his. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. And in that moment, something shifted. He had stepped in to help her, but now it was clear that he had just begun a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the city. The streets were quieter now, with most people retreating into their homes after a long day. Yet in the corner of a small park, just a few blocks away from where the alien girl had landed, something unusual was happening. The young man, who had stepped in to protect the alien girl, found himself sitting on a worn-out bench, his head buried in his hands. The events of the day had been overwhelming. From the moment he had intervened to protect her, nothing had felt real. The alien girl had shown powers no one could explain, powers that no one had ever seen before. What was she? Where was she from? And most importantly, why had she chosen him, an ordinary guy, to help her? He looked up from his hands to find the alien girl sitting across from him, her small form curled up on the other side of the bench. Her legs were drawn up to her chest, and her silver hair shimmered softly in the fading light. She was silent, her large eyes locked on the ground. She seemed to be lost in thought, as if trying to understand the strange world she had suddenly found herself in. The young man could tell she was still frightened. Despite her display of power earlier, she was clearly confused. She didn't speak much, and when she did, her words were broken and strange, her language unfamiliar. But there was something about her, something vulnerable, that made him want to protect her even more. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She nodded slowly, but didn't speak. Her tiny form trembled slightly, and he could tell she was still unsure of her surroundings. The young man felt a pang of sympathy. No matter how powerful she seemed, she was still an alien alone in a world she didn't understand. He gave her a soft smile, trying to reassure her, but it felt forced. "You don't have to be scared. I'm here to help you. You're not alone. Anymore." The alien girl studied him for a moment, her gaze intense. It was almost as if she was trying to figure him out, trying to understand his intentions. Then, without warning, she reached into a small pouch that hung from her waist. From it, she pulled out a small object, a strange, glowing stone. The stone was unlike anything the young man had ever seen. It glowed faintly with an ethereal blue light, and when she held it in her hand, it seemed to pulse, almost alive. The alien girl stared at it for a moment, then handed it to him. He took the stone carefully, unsure of what it was. "What's this?" he asked, his voice low. The alien girl pointed to it, then made a gesture to her chest, as if to say, "It's part of me." Her words were jumbled, but he understood the meaning. This stone, whatever it was, seemed important to her. She had shared it with him, placing her trust in him. The young man felt a sense of responsibility growing inside him, a feeling he had never expected. Before he could ask more questions, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. The young man's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly stood up, clutching the stone in his hand. He turned toward the source of the sound and saw the group of bullies approaching again. Jake, the leader, was at the front, his expression filled with malice. The young man's body tensed as he looked at them. They were back, and this time they weren't alone. The bullies had brought reinforcements, more people, older and rougher looking, with an air of authority about them. Jake sneered as he saw the young man and the alien girl sitting together. Well, he said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "I thought you'd be gone by now. I guess you're not as smart as I thought." He glanced at the alien girl, who was now standing next to the young man, her small figure shaking. "You really think you can protect her? You don't know what you're messing with." The young man's stomach tightened. He could feel the anger rising inside him, but he tried to stay calm. He wouldn't let these bullies intimidate him. Not this time. Not when he had a responsibility to someone who couldn't protect herself. "Leave her alone, Jake," the young man said firmly, stepping forward. "This is your last warning." Jake laughed, a hollow, mocking sound. "Last warning? What are you going to do, huh? You think you're some kind of hero? You're nothing." He snapped his fingers, signaling his gang to move in. The group of bullies and their tough-looking friends surrounded them. The young man's heart pounded in his chest. He could see the fear in the alien girl's eyes, but also something else, a glimmer of hope. She believed in him. She believed he could protect her. A voice inside him told him to run, to escape, but there was no way he could do that, not when she needed him. Without thinking, the young man took a deep breath and turned toward the alien girl. He looked her in the eyes and nodded. He couldn't let her down now. "Stay behind me," he said softly, his voice steady. The alien girl looked at him, and for the first time, she gave him a small nod. There was trust in her eyes, and it filled him with determination. He had no idea what these bullies were capable of, but he wouldn't let them harm her. As Jake and his crew stepped forward, the young man stood his ground. He didn't know how he would fight them off, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The first bully lunged at him, but the young man sidestepped, his instincts kicking in. He blocked the next blow, and before Jake could make a move, the young man pushed him back. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show them that he wasn't afraid. In that moment, something inside him changed. The hero within him was waking up, and there was no turning back. The confrontation with the bullies had come to an abrupt halt. The young man, though he had been outnumbered, had stood his ground, and somehow that was enough to stop the attack. Jake and his gang, stunned by his resilience and the strange courage he displayed, hesitated. They exchanged uneasy glances. Before, one by one, they turned and walked away, muttering threats under their breath. The air still hummed with tension, but the immediate danger had passed. For now at least the young man stood in the middle of the street, his chest rising and falling as his heart raced. He looked around, realizing just how surreal the moment was. The crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation had scattered, leaving only the alien girl and him in the center. She was standing a few feet away, her small form still shaking, her wide, glowing eyes locked onto him. He took a deep breath and stepped toward her, trying to calm his racing thoughts. This was no longer just about protecting her from a few bullies. Something bigger was happening here, something that he couldn't fully understand. The alien girl had trusted him, and now it felt like he had an obligation to protect her, not just from bullies, but from everything else she might face in this unfamiliar world. "You're safe now," he said softly, trying to sound reassuring, though his voice trembled with uncertainty. He didn't know what he was supposed to do next. What did an ordinary guy do when an alien girl fell out of the sky and needed help? The alien girl blinked up at him, her long silver hair shimmering faintly in the dim light of the street lamps. Her eyes were still filled with confusion, but there was a flicker of something else, something that looked like gratitude. She took a hesitant step toward him, as if uncertain of what to do. Her fingers twitched at her sides, and she raised one small hand slightly, as if she was about to say something. He kneeled down to meet her at eye level, not wanting to tower over her. "You can trust me," he said, his voice as gentle as he could. "Make it. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I'll help you, I promise." For a long moment, the alien girl just stared at him. Then, to his surprise, she stepped forward, her tiny hand reaching out toward him. He took it slowly, as if unsure of what would happen. She didn't speak, but her eyes, those deep, shining eyes, spoke volumes. She was terrified, yes, but there was something else too. She had no idea where she was, no idea what was happening, but she seemed to trust him. In that simple, silent moment, something shifted between them. It was as though an invisible bond had formed. He wasn't just helping her anymore. He wasn't just the guy who stepped in to stop a group of bullies. He was something more now, a protector, a guide. And the alien girl wasn't just a scared, lost creature. She was someone who needed him, just as much as he found himself needing her. The young man helped her sit down on a nearby bench. He could feel her trembling slightly, so he sat beside her, trying his best to stay calm, though the questions in his mind were piling up. Why was she here? What did she want? Where did she come from? And why had she chosen him? "You don't have to be afraid," he said after a long pause. "I don't understand all of this either, but I'm not going to leave you." She nodded slowly, the motion almost imperceptible. But the slight, reassuring movement made him feel a little better. At least she was listening. At least she wasn't alone anymore. The young man took a deep breath and then asked the first question that had been on his mind since the moment she appeared. "What's your name?" The alien girl's eyes widened slightly. She looked down at her hands, which were still shaking. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, it seemed like she might cry. The language barrier was real. She couldn't speak English, and even her own language, whatever. It seemed too complicated for him to understand, but the young man didn't want to give up. He pointed to himself. I'm Sam," he said slowly, trying to show her that it was okay. "Sam." She looked at him, then at her own hands again, clearly struggling with the concept. Finally, she raised a finger and pointed to herself. Shaking her head, she opened her mouth again, but still no words came. Then, she gestured toward her chest, making a soft sound that was far too alien to be understood. It was clear that this wasn't going to be easy, but Sam felt a strange kind of empathy for her. "It's okay," Sam said gently. "I get it. You don't need to talk to me right now. I'm not going anywhere." The alien girl seemed to calm a little at his words. There was something about the way Sam said them that made her feel like she wasn't just a strange, otherworldly being. She was a person, and she wasn't alone. Slowly, she reached into her pouch again and pulled out that same glowing stone from before. She held it out to him, her eyes wide as she gently placed it in his palm. Sam examined the stone closely. It was warm to the touch, the light inside it flickering like a heartbeat. The glow seemed to pulse with a kind of energy he couldn't quite explain. There was power in it, power that seemed to connect with the alien girl in some way. "I don't know what this is," Sam said quietly, "but I'm guessing it's important to you, right?" She nodded, her expression serious. In her eyes, Sam could see the weight of her story, the importance of the stone, and the danger that might come with it. It wasn't just a token, it was something much bigger. Something that she had to protect. Something that now, by extension, he had to protect too. As Sam held the stone, he realized something important. This wasn't just about protecting an alien girl from bullies anymore. This was about something much larger, something unknown, and maybe even dangerous. He had a feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. For now, all he could do was stay by her side. He couldn't turn back, not when there was so much at stake. "I'll help you keep it safe," Sam promised, his voice steady. "Whatever happens next, I'm with you." And in that quiet moment, Sam and the alien girl shared a connection that went beyond words, a promise, a bond, a friendship that neither of them could have predicted. But whatever was coming next, they would face it together. The days following the encounter with the bullies felt almost surreal. The young man Sam spent most of his time with the alien girl, whom he had begun to think of as Lyra, a name he had picked out simply because it sounded like something gentle, something from the stars. Her real name, he suspected, might be something far more complex, but she had yet to say a word he could understand. Lyra had become more comfortable in the days that followed. She learned to trust Sam, and though she couldn't speak much, her small gestures, the way she looked at him with those wide, reflective eyes, said everything. The glowing stone she had given him seemed to draw her closer to him, as if she saw him as the protector of something ancient, something incredibly important. It was early one evening when the calm was shattered. Sam had just finished a quick errand to grab some food for both of them, a small task that had become routine. Lyra sat on a bench near a park fountain, watching the evening sun fade into darkness, her head tilted as if absorbing every detail of her surroundings. The world was still foreign to her, and yet she appeared mesmerized by the simplest things, the way the light flickered through the leaves, the sound of children laughing nearby, the distant hum of city traffic. To Sam, these were all familiar sights, sounds, and smells. But to Lyra, everything was new, and each moment was an exploration. Sam returned with a bag of food, the faint aroma of pizza filling the air. He smiled at Lyra, glad to see her at peace. As he set the bag down beside her, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. For the first time since their meeting, he allowed himself to relax. Then, the wind shifted. Sam felt that something was wrong. It was the unmistakable shift in the air that made his heart race. He had felt this tension before, when the bullies had gathered, but now it was different. This time, it wasn't just the group of teenagers. It was something bigger, something more dangerous. Sam turned his head toward the entrance of the park. In the distance, he saw the figures of Jake and his gang along with a few unfamiliar faces. They were walking toward him, but it wasn't their approach that unsettled him. It was the coldness in their eyes, the way they moved with purpose. They weren't just coming to pick a fight, they had a mission. "Lyra," Sam whispered urgently, kneeling down in front of her. "We need to go, now." Lyra looked up at him, her silver hair reflecting the dim streetlights, and for the first time, she understood the urgency in his voice. She nodded slowly, standing up, her small frame tense with fear. She gripped the glowing stone tightly in her hand, as if it had suddenly become an anchor for her in a storm. Sam grabbed the bag of food, but he knew it wasn't going to be enough to shield them from what was coming. Jake's voice echoed across the park, filled with malice. "Thought you could hide, huh? Thought you could just run away?" Sam's heart sank. He had been hoping this moment wouldn't come, that somehow they would be left in peace. But the bullies weren't done. They had brought reinforcements, and Sam wasn't sure how much longer he could protect Lyra from what they had planned. "Stay behind me," Sam ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. He could hear Lyra's breath quicken behind him as the group approached. His pulse thundered in his ears as the full scope of the situation dawned on him. This wasn't just about a small group of bullies anymore. There was something darker at play. Jake stopped a few feet away, a twisted grin on his face. "You think you can protect her? You really don't get it, do you?" He waved a hand to the men behind him, tall muscular figures in dark clothing, their faces unreadable. They weren't just schoolyard thugs anymore. There was something more. Behind Jake, a man stepped forward, older than the rest, his face scarred and hard. His eyes glinted with something dangerous. Sam felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was no ordinary thug. This man had the air of someone used to handling far more serious business than high school bullying. Jake's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You don't understand what she is, do you? You don't know what she's capable of. But we do. We've been looking for her, and we're not leaving without her." The man who had stepped forward, the one with the scars, spoke. His voice was low and menacing. "We work for people who want what she's got, and they'll pay anything for it." He glanced at Lyra, his eyes cold. "Her powers, they'll change everything. We're taking her with us, whether you like it or not." Sam's hand tightened around the food bag, his fingers aching. This wasn't just a fight over a harmless alien anymore. These were people who knew exactly what they were dealing with, and they wanted to use Lyra's abilities for something far more sinister. Lyra, who had been standing silently behind Sam, stepped forward now. Her wide eyes, usually so filled with fear, were steady and resolute. She held the glowing stone up high, and the air around her seemed to vibrate with energy. The same energy that had earlier protected them from the bullies seemed to hum in the atmosphere now, only much stronger. Sam could feel it, a power that was both beautiful and terrifying at once. "Lyra," Sam said softly, reaching out to her, trying to make sure she didn't do anything reckless. But Lyra wasn't looking at him. She was focused on the man with the scars, the one who had spoken of taking her. With a sharp, sudden motion, Lyra raised the stone above her head, and a blinding light erupted from it. The force was so intense that it sent Sam stumbling backward, shielding his eyes. The bullies and their allies recoiled, their hands thrown up to block the light. The ground beneath them trembled, and Sam could feel the power radiating off Lyra like a shockwave. "Stop!" Sam shouted, but his voice barely made it through the roar of energy that filled the air. Lyra's small frame shook with the intensity of the energy she was releasing, but she wasn't attacking. She was trying to defend herself, to protect them both from what was to come. The bullies and their dark allies were retreating now, but Sam knew they would be back. This wasn't over. And now it was clear there were people out there who would stop at nothing to get their hands on Lyra and the power she possessed. Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He had thought he was just protecting a lost alien girl, but now it seemed that the stakes were much higher than he could have ever imagined. He turned to Lyra, his voice trembling with urgency. "We need to go, now. We can't stay here." But as he spoke, the weight of his words began to sink in. The people who had come for Lyra weren't going to stop. And neither was Sam, not as long as she was by his side. The city felt colder. Now its streets and alleyways no longer just a backdrop for everyday life. The danger Sam had once only suspected was becoming a harsh, unrelenting reality. The bullies were no longer the only threat to him and Lyra. It was clear now that their lives were entangled in something much larger, something darker. After the confrontation in the park, Sam didn't take Lyra back to his apartment, nor did he stay in any of the usual places he thought of as safe. The sense of urgency pushed him to think outside the box. He didn't know what Lyra's power was capable of, nor did he know the full extent of the enemies who had already started hunting them. But one thing was certain: he couldn't afford to take chances anymore. They had taken refuge in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, hidden from view, away from prying eyes. It was an unlikely sanctuary, but it was the only place Sam could think of where they would be safe for the time being. The place had a strange energy to it, empty but filled with echoes of its past. The windows were dusty, the floor cracked and worn, but to Lyra, it was just another foreign place. She had no concept of safety, only survival. Sam sat on a wooden crate in the corner, looking at Lyra across the room. She had been quiet, too quiet, for the last few hours. She was sitting against the far wall, her knees drawn up to her chest. The glow of the stone still pulsed faintly, lying next to her. Its light flickered like a heartbeat, responding to some invisible rhythm, and Sam felt its pull. Whatever it was, it had to be the key to everything. Lyra's gaze drifted to the stone, then back to Sam. She didn't speak, but her eyes held something he hadn't seen before, something that felt almost like guilt, as if she knew something she wasn't telling him. Something important. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Sam stood up and slowly made his way over to her, kneeling down to her level. He wasn't sure how to approach her, but this silence was too much. Too heavy. Lyra, Sam said softly, his voice barely a whisper. You've been keeping something from me, haven't you? She didn't flinch at his words, but her eyes flickered briefly to the stone, then back to his face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She didn't need to speak for Sam to understand the weight of her silence. She was holding back, and Sam wasn't sure whether it was fear or something else that made her reluctant to share. Taking a deep breath, Sam sat down next to her. I know you've been through a lot, and I know I don't fully understand what's going on. But whatever it is, whatever you're hiding, it's time to tell me. I can't protect you if you don't let me in. Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, Sam thought she was going to pull away again. But then, in the softest of movements, she reached out and picked up the glowing stone. She looked at it for a long time, her small fingers brushing the surface. Before finally speaking, her voice was low, almost a whisper, as she struggled to form words in a language Sam could barely comprehend. It wasn't the broken alien sounds she had used before. This time, it was something different, something deeper. The tone was filled with regret, as if the very act of sharing this information was a burden she had carried for far too long. The stone. She began slowly, glancing at Sam as if gauging his reaction. It is part of me. Sam's brow furrowed, but he stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. She took another deep breath before speaking again. I am not just an alien, I am a guardian. She paused, then added in the soft voice, of a very powerful secret. Sam's heart skipped a beat. A guardian? That was a word that held weight. A protector, but of what? A secret? Lyra's eyes were distant, as if she were trying to recall something long buried. The stone, she said, lifting it up once more. It was given to me by the elders. It holds the heart of our planet. Without it, our people, my people, are lost. Sam's confusion deepened, but his instinct told him that Lyra wasn't lying. She was telling him the truth, even if the truth seemed too strange to be real. She wasn't just a scared alien girl hiding in the corner. She was a protector, someone who had been entrusted with something much bigger than herself. Your planet? Sam asked quietly, his mind racing with the implications. So this stone, it's not just something random you found. It's important? Lyra nodded, her face grim. It is everything. It holds the key to our survival, our future. The elders gave it to me because I was chosen to protect it, but I failed. My ship was attacked and the stone was damaged during the crash. I don't know how much time we have before it stops working altogether. If it does, my people, they won't survive. The weight of her words hit Sam like a cold wave. Lyra wasn't just lost. She wasn't just a stray traveler from another world. She was a keeper of something that could change everything, not just for her people, but for Earth itself. Suddenly, everything made sense. The bullies weren't just being cruel for the sake of it. They weren't the only ones after Lyra. There were other forces, other groups, who knew the power that the stone held. And they would stop at nothing to get it. Sam felt the cold, hard grip of fear take hold in his chest. They weren't just after Lyra anymore. They were after the power inside her stone, the power that could shape the future of entire civilizations. He couldn't let them take it. He couldn't let them hurt her. Lyra turned her eyes to Sam, as if seeing him for the first time. The expression on her face was one of desperation, mixed with a quiet resolve. "You must protect it," she whispered. "You must protect me." Sam reached out, taking her small, trembling hand in his. He couldn't even imagine what she had been through, what she had lost. But in that moment, he knew one thing: he would protect her. He would do whatever it took. "I will," he said, his voice steady, even though his heart was racing. "I won't let anyone take it from you, or from us." And as the weight of her story settled in the dimly lit warehouse, Sam understood that the path ahead would be harder than anything he had faced before. The bullies and their allies were nothing compared to the enemies now closing in. But one thing was certain: no matter what came next, he wouldn't back down. He couldn't. Not when Lyra's future, and perhaps the fate of the world, depended on it. The air was thick with tension, the kind of silence that settled deep in the bones. Sam sat across from Lyra, his eyes darting around the dimly lit warehouse. His mind was racing, trying to piece together everything they had learned in the past. Few days, the stone, the danger, the enemies closing in. And most importantly, the bond he had formed with Lyra, a bond that had become more than just a matter of protection. It had become a promise. The stone lay between them on the cracked wooden floor, its faint glow pulsing rhythmically, like a heartbeat echoing through the empty space. Sam could feel its power, and now more than ever, he understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about keeping Lyra safe anymore. It was about preventing something far darker from falling into the wrong hands. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and a chill ran through the room. Sam's muscles tensed, his body immediately on alert. He could hear the sound of boots crunching against gravel. There was no mistaking it now. They had found them. Lyra's eyes widened, her hand instinctively reaching for the stone, clutching it tightly. Sam stood up slowly, his heart thumping. He didn't need to say anything to Lyra. She knew what was coming. The time for running had passed. This was it. The sound of footsteps grew louder as figures emerged from the shadows. 3 men, all dressed in dark tactical clothing, stepped into the faint light, their faces cold and unreadable. Behind them, a 4th figure emerged, tall and menacing. The scarred man, the one Sam had seen before, the one who had made it clear that they wouldn't stop until they had Lyra and the stone. "Well, well," the scarred man said, his voice a low growl. "We finally found you." Sam's jaw tightened, his fingers instinctively curling into fists. He could feel the anger building inside him, the need to protect Lyra growing stronger with every word. He couldn't let these men take her. And he certainly couldn't let them get their hands on the stone. "You're not taking her," Sam said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "Leave now, and we won't have to do this." The scarred man chuckled darkly, his eyes glinting with a dangerous spark. "You really think you can stop us?" You're just a kid. What do you know about protecting her? About what she's carrying? Sam swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. I know enough, he said, stepping forward, placing himself between Lyra and the men. And I'm not letting anyone hurt her. Not now, not ever. The scarred man's expression shifted, growing more serious. He nodded to one of the others, who stepped forward and raised a strange device in his hand, a small, metallic object that hummed with power. Sam's eyes narrowed. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel the danger in the air. The man activated the device with a flick of his wrist, and immediately a powerful beam shot out, striking the ground just inches from Sam's feet. The blast created a small crater in the floor, sending shards of wood flying into the air. Sam jumped back, his heart racing. The device was a weapon, one meant to neutralize. Lyra gasped, her eyes widening in fear. Sam quickly reached out to her, pushing her behind him. The last thing he needed was for her to get caught in the crossfire. He needed to protect her, to keep her safe, no matter the cost. The scarred man's eyes never left Sam, his smile widening. You don't understand, do you? He said, his voice dripping with mockery. This isn't just about her, or the stone. We have orders, the people we work for. They'll do anything to get what's inside that stone. And once we have it, we'll control everything. Sam's stomach churned. The weight of his words hit harder than any physical blow. He wasn't just up against thugs or bullies anymore. He was up against a well-organized, dangerous group of people with the resources to do whatever it took to seize the power Lyra was carrying. The future of her world, and perhaps his own, was in jeopardy. But Sam wasn't about to let them win, not now. Not when he had come so far. Then you'll have to kill me first, Sam said, his voice filled with cold determination. The scarred man's smile faltered for a moment, and then, in a swift movement, he nodded to his men. Without warning, they lunged at Sam, attempting to overpower him. Sam dodged the first strike, his body moving on instinct. He'd trained himself for moments like this, even if he hadn't expected to be in a life-or-death battle to protect an alien girl. He ducked under another blow, grabbing a metal pipe from the floor and swinging it at one of the men. The impact sent the man crashing into a nearby wall, but it didn't stop the others. They kept coming, relentless. Lyra, stay back, Sam shouted, swinging again as another attacker advanced. His heart was racing, his every move calculated. But desperate, he had to hold them off. He had to protect her. But then, just as it seemed like the attackers might overpower him, a new surge of energy flooded the room, this time coming from Lyra. Sam turned, his eyes wide with disbelief, as Lyra stepped forward, her small frame glowing with an intensity he had never seen before. The stone in her hand pulsed with blinding light, sending shockwaves of power throughout the warehouse. The men stopped in their tracks, their faces filled with confusion and fear as the energy radiated from her. Lyra's eyes were focused, her expression hardening as she lifted the stone higher, the air around her vibrating with raw power. The scarred man took a step back, his face a mix of awe and fear. You don't understand. The scarred man spat, his voice trembling. You can't control this power. It's too much for you. But Lyra's gaze never wavered. She was no longer just the scared girl Sam had found. She was a guardian, a protector, and she wasn't going to let these men steal what was hers. What was their future? With a sharp motion, Lyra raised her hand and unleashed a wave of energy that sent the attackers flying backward, slamming into the walls with force. The warehouse trembled, the entire structure shaking with the power of her abilities. For a moment, everything was silent. Sam stood there, breathless, as he watched Lyra. She had done it. She had fought back. She had taken control, but they weren't done. The scarred man, battered and bruised, stood slowly, his eyes full of rage. This isn't over, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. We'll be back. And next time, We won't let you stop us." Sam stepped forward, standing beside Lyra, ready for whatever came next. "No," he said firmly, his voice steady. "You won't." And with that, the battle for Lyra's future and the fate of their world had only just begun.